Hi, welcome to the Land Whisperer channel. If you're here for the first time, then my name is Chris. I'm a writer of short stories and I am also a spiritual land worker. And if you're returning, then thank you very much indeed for coming back. I really do appreciate it. Last week, we spoke about some of the techniques I used in order to extract the psychic information from the stones. This week, I'm going to share with you that psychic information. It will cover the period of the early Neolithic, which is 4000 BC to 3000 BC, and it will also share some of the information about the lives of the people and what they did at the site. It's important to say that this is not archaeological information. This is purely psychic information that I've got from channeling these stones and also from other spiritual sources. So, if it resonates with you, that's fantastic. And if you think it's a load of rubbish, well, okay, fair enough. But at least I hope you enjoy the video. And if you do, please consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you want to know more about when I post a video, then please click the notification bell as well. Thanks. Now to the video. So first up, we have two definitions for you. Divine feminine energy feels like a force that flows within. It's characterized by empathy, intuition, a strong connection with the community and the natural world. This energy is nurturing, healing, and supportive. Divine masculine energy represents leadership, taking charge, doing rather than being. Unlike feminine energy, which teaches us to let things flow to us, masculine energy teaches to follow through and to bring things from the spiritual into physical reality. Between 3554 to 3070 BC, the land at Stanton Drew was divine feminine in an energy sense. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that people living in this area had a feeling of peace and deep connection to the land. Here, women were in charge of wider community decisions and the family unit. Men were given the role of herding and protecting the cattle and the community at large. Unusually for Britain, here men married into a woman's family, where elsewhere in the country the opposite was usually the case. Men, because they were in charge of the cattle, had an innate sense of the road and were apt to wander a lot. So families preferred girls to boys in the area because the girls would tend to remain in the area for more of the time based on their designated tasks within the community. This helped with young families as they grew up. The earliest Neolithic peoples arrived in the wider area around 3650 BC, but the first part of this site to be constructed was the cove, which was a long barrow according to this psychic information. It was set on raised ground with marsh all around it, so it was like an island in the swamp. The people lived elsewhere in the landscape, but the shamans and their acolytes came to this place frequently. It was the trees and the energy of the river and the marsh water that drew them here. The cove was somewhat unconnected to the area of the stone circle because construction of the long barrow commenced in 3554 BC. The concentric pits that made up the first period of the circle's construction didn't start until 3326 BC, so there was a 200-year gap between the construction of the cove long barrow and the construction of the circle. The community would only visit the long barrow when someone was near death or ill, for it was the preserve of the shamans, who were all women at this time, to heal those who were ill or to process the bodies when an individual died, and to guide their spirit into the underworld in the first few months following death. The shamans had many types of rituals associated with this aspect of their work. For those who don't know, a shaman is someone who has access to and works with the realms of the unseen. They converse with spirits, animals, inanimate objects like stones and mountains. They have a deep connection to the natural world and usually commune with the spirits of the wilds through a ritual trance-like state. The trance can be induced by drugs from certain fungi or plants, or through more physical means like continuous drumming and dancing, until closer to exhaustion, a non-thinking state is reached. At that point, you are in the realms of the unseen, and many unusual and fantastic experiences can be found, and it's my preferred method of accessing the unseen world. As I mentioned, the shamans of Stanton Drew were attracted to this area initially because of the nearby river, marsh water, and the trees. The spiritual significance of water is that it is a liquid form of consciousness. I spoke about the term animism last week, which is defined as the belief that objects, places, landscapes, creatures, and plants all possess a distinct spiritual vibration, essence, or consciousness. Water is often thought of as a receiver and a reflector of divine wisdom, and is associated throughout the spiritual community to be a divine feminine energy. When you consider that the area around Stanton Drew was divine feminine in an energetic sense, it's not hard to understand part of the cause of that. The other element that drew the shamans here was the trees. Being older and taller meant that the shamans could access higher knowledge just by tapping into the energy of the trees' auras. Trees are often delighted to help humans who ask questions of the land surrounding them. The tree, to a shaman, is seen in 3 parts. Each part is associated with the life of a human. That is the metaphor of the world tree, which is integral to many ancient and modern indigenous populations. The canopy is considered to be equivalent to a human's birth, the trunk equivalent to our lifetime, and the roots equivalent to our death and our afterlife. A tree, to a shaman, was considered to be another member of the family or community. In a physical sense, they were like a static brother or sister. They were, and still are, to many of us, sacred beings, alive and conscious. At the centre of the great circle grew a huge and ancient hazel tree, and around 3400 BC, shamans had encouraged people to visit and worship the tree as a provider of hazelnuts in the right season. So the community had already set a precedent of worship and reverence at this site. The tree was sacred to them and was seen like a grandmother spirit. It looked after them. After 70 years, the original tree began to die, for reasons I'll explain, but the shamans had already grown a series of saplings from nuts and nurtured them nearby the parent tree. A hazel tree will grow for around 80 years naturally, but this practice of planting a sapling of the parent tree to perpetuate a dynasty of successive hazels became a long-standing ritual here. As the land around the site prospered, under the divine feminine-centered worship and nurturing of the hazel tree, the community took the message of this place being a land of plenty out into the surrounding lands. It wasn't long before many other groups began to look to this community's land of plenty, and many became jealous. Some shamans from other communities started to send negative psychic attacks to the shamans of Stanton Drew, and particularly against the land and the tree. Under those attacks, they both began to wither slightly, and the shamans here needed to counter the worst of the negative energy sent by the jealous shamans. So, in 3326 BC, they started to construct the first 3 circles of concentric rings around the central hazel tree. Into these pits, tree trunks were placed that had been specifically selected by the shamans for their protective or nurturing energy, so that the hazel tree culture here could continue to thrive and also extend the life of the tree for longer than it would naturally survive. The wooden palisades were made of oak, pine, birch, alder, willow and ash, and once they were chosen, some were split into 2 halves and placed around the hazel, with the bark side facing outwards and the heartwood facing inwards, which amplified the positive nurturing energy of the chosen trunks and reflected it back towards the hazel tree in the centre. As the psychic attacks continued, more protection for the hazel tree was needed, and the second set of 3 concentric rings of tree trunks was constructed in 3200 BC, which corresponded to the outer rings, numbers 7 to 9, closest to the stones that stand here now. Then, just 50 years later, around 3150 BC, the last set of 3 rings was built, those in the centre, i.e. rings 4 to 6. The land and way of life of these people was thus preserved until around 3070 BC, when change began to creep into this most settled of communities. Well, thank you. You've made it to the end of the video, which must mean that the video at least resonated with you. In some ways, it's kind of a relief to have the information out there, and I'm looking forward to seeing how you all react to it. I'm sure there'll be plenty of different viewpoints in the comments, and if you have any questions, please just ask away. I'll probably do a separate video when I answer all of those questions, if there are any, and as and when they arise. Next week, I will be talking to you about changing times, i.e. the period between the wooden circles and the stone circles. So, as always, I'll leave it until then and pass you unconditional love, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.